If you are new to Blender, then welcome. You're in the right place. This is a complete beginner's tutorial series designed to show you how to use all the main features of Blender whilst learning how to create a delicious donut and some coffee. Now, I know you are excited, you want to start clicking on things and learning things and some coffee. Blender, g'day. If you are new to Blender, then welcome. You're in the right place. This is a complete beginner's tutorial series designed to show you how to use all the main features of Blender whilst learning how to create a delicious donut and some coffee. Now, I know you are excited, you want to start clicking on things and learning things, but since this is part one of a series, I want to take just 60 seconds to explain what you will learn and what you won't learn. So, right now, this is you. You are a little red dot and you are entering into the wide world of 3D. And if you've done any research, you probably know there is a lot to learn. And it can be a little overwhelming and you can feel like I'm never going to learn it all, so why bother? Well, the good news is you don't need to know everything. If you're familiar with the 80-20 rule, there is really only 20% of the features inside 3D software that you use 80% of the time. And that is what this course is, that you use 80% of the time. And that is what this course is all about. It's teaching you those core concepts that you're going to use all the time so that you can then, by the end of it, feel confident creating your own projects in the future. So this is all going up for free on YouTube, and I've just separated it by level, just like in terms of chapter, so you know what to expect in terms of difficulty. But if you follow it from start to finish, rest assured you can create a donut and coffee. That final image there, you can get there because there are 500,000 people who completed the last version of this tutorial that I made 3 years ago. There's even a Blender Donut subreddit where you can see the results of people that finished the last course. So it might look advanced at this stage, like, oh, I don't know 3D, how am I gonna, you can get there, right? If you just follow it through to the end. Now, this is part one of level one, so this is gonna be the basics of the basics, and we are gonna start with the user interface. And just to keep it interesting, I promise you if you finish the end of this video, you will learn how to set a monkey head on fire. Random, but you'll see. So, open Blender for the first time, and this is what you should see. Now, this big area here, this big patch of space is called the 3D viewport, and it's where you'll spend probably 90% of your time. If you're modeling something, if you're like laying out a scene and you're moving things around, it's all going to happen right here. So let's talk about moving stuff. So we have the cube here, the default cube selected, and let's say we want to move it. So if you go to the toolbar, you've got a move function, right? And when you do that, you'll see that you get these arrows that appear over your cube. Now, if I just click and drag on any of these arrows, you can see that I'm moving it along that direction, that axis. So there's 3 axes because there are 3 dimensions in the world: the Z axis, the X axis, and the Y axis. So along those, I can sort of move it anywhere within this space here. Okay, so that's moving, and then the next one underneath that, you've got rotate. I can rotate something along a specific axis. Or by the way, if you just like don't click on any of these like highlighted colors, just click anywhere in there, it's gonna like trackball it, which is like just free rotate. If you release, by the way, it's gonna like, release the mouse, it's going to like drop it wherever you set it to. But if while rotating it, you just right click, it's gonna like cancel the action, or you hit escape, right? But anyways, then you've got scale. So if I click the scale option, now I've got that function there, or this axis, or that axis, etc. Or click anywhere within there, and now you're scaling just the size of the thing. Okay, so move, rotate, scale. And then by the way, that one down there is like all 3 of them mashed in together for, I don't know, people who are running out of time and they need to click them all at the same time for some reason. But anyways, That's how you can do things, but actually the faster way to work is to memorize the hotkeys, because you're going to use this a lot, and every time you want to like rotate or scale something, if you have to go up here, then click on this, then click on this, it's a lot of work. It doesn't sound like it, but when you're doing it like repeatedly, hundreds of times an hour, it's a lot of work. So what I would suggest you memorize is the hotkeys. So to move something, it's G. G for grab. Okay, G. And when you do that, it's attached to your cursor. So you just tap the key once, and you don't have to like click or hold or anything like that. It's now attached to my cursor. If I right click, I'm canceling the movement. But if while it's moving like that, if I just left click, it's now confirmed the movement. Now it's free movement right now. So if I was to push the letter of any of those axes, like Z, I'm now moving it along the Z axis, or X, or Y. Okay, so again, that's while it's moving. If I hit any of those keys, I can snap it to that axis. Or instead of having to like do a separate key, so while it's moving, if instead of hitting those axes buttons, if I hold down the middle mouse button, which is, did I talk about the middle mouse button? I didn't talk about it. I've recorded this tutorial 5 times. If you click in on the scroll wheel, that's the middle mouse button. And if you hold that in, you'll see that it's like snapping it to a specific axis. So that's actually a really fast way to work. So if I hit G, I can move it down. So G, quickly tap middle mouse to get it to the right axis, then click, then G, quickly tap middle mouse, get it to the right axis. I can do this, and I can move this cube anywhere. And it's a really fast way of working. It's great. And those hotkeys work the exact same way. So, for rotate and scale. So if while rotating, free rotate, X, Y, Z, or middle mouse, and I'm going to rotate it along the X axis. Scaling, again, I don't have to be in scale mode. I can just hit S for scale, and that's going to scale it like that. Or I can S, scale along the Y axis by tapping Y, X, Z, or S, middle mouse button, and snap it to a specific axis that I have in mind. Okay, so those hotkeys, G, R, and S, tip of the iceberg, my friends. A lot of hotkeys to come. There's a lot of hotkeys in Blender, and so I created a shortcut PDF with like all the keyboard shortcuts. So if you join my email newsletter, I'll send you that. It's a PDF that you can print out. out and stick on your wall, or a Google Doc that you can like save and reference on a separate monitor or whatever. But the link for that is in the description if you are interested, because we're going to learn more hotkeys. Okay, so the next hotkey is moving around, like navigating within this space here, because we're just looking at it from this view. But let's say this cube was all the way off screen. Where's it gone? How are we going to see it now? So if you use the middle mouse button, which is again the scroll wheel, if you push that in, if you hold that down, that is called orbiting, or rotating the view, but orbiting, right? And that enables you to rotate around the view. Now you'll see that we can't really get close to that cube there because we're just looking at the center of our scene right now. So if we want to pan to a separate area, if we hold down Shift middle mouse button and drag across, then we are looking at a new area. So those two functions, middle mouse button to orbit and then Shift middle mouse button to drag to a new section, are very common. So I can go anywhere in my space just with those two functions, Shift middle mouse button to pan, middle mouse button to orbit. So just familiarize yourself with that. Just try to move around to different areas of the canvas, the 3D view, like so. Now, if perchance you do not have a mouse with a scroll wheel, or you're on a laptop with a trackpad, good luck with that, by the way. Tough road ahead. No, but there is another way, which is to use this gizmo in the top right hand corner. If you just click and drag anywhere within that, that is orbit. And then if you click this hand tool and just hold, that will move it. So this whole gizmo section here was designed, it's a new feature of Blender, but it's basically designed because, you know, we know that tablet devices and everything are on the rise. And at some point, people are going to start using them on Surface tablets or something, and they've only got a stylus. So you don't need a mouse, you know, with all the functions to move around Blender anymore. You've got this if you needed it. Or, by the way, let's say, you know, you just don't have the scroll wheel thing, but you don't want to have to keep using the gizmo. If you go to your user preferences, you'll see something there in input called Emulate 3-Button Mouse, which will just enable you to use Alt and then left click as the middle mouse alternative, essentially. So, yeah. The other one I'll quickly mention, because I think I've been doing it without realizing, scroll wheel, that's zoom, or you can click hold down the little magnifying glass thing and you'll zoom in and out. Now, the cube is over there and we could get to it by panning over there, but when you've got a lot of stuff in the scene, like let's say we duplicate this cube, which you could do by going to Object and then click on Duplicate Objects, but you can see the hotkey there. You can memorize that hotkey, Shift D. We can move that cube over there, right? So we're looking at the cube over here, but now we've got to get all the way over there. A lot of work. So if you just click on an object and you want to focus on that, like just zoom over there, if you hit the number pad period key, which is, yeah, that little dot in the bottom corner of your number pad, it will focus on that object. Okay? So that's a very fast way of like changing your focus. So you don't have to like fart around with like, oh, gotta Move over there, extra slow. Nice and easy now. Easy does it. Don't get lost, right? And by the way, going back to people with a laptop, most laptops don't have number pads. So the other hotkey that you should memorize is the tilde key, which is that key underneath the escape key. There's one there that says view selected. So it'll bring up a pie menu, and one of the options in the pie menu is view selected. And release, and there we go. It does the exact same thing as number pad period key. All right, let's delete this little extra cube. Let's find my original cube, and I'm going to move this over back to the center with G, middle mouse, to drag it along the y-axis, and then I'll hit number pad period again and focus on that cube. And look at that, we're back at the start. Now, there's more to Blender than just cubes, so let's make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to delete the cube here by just tapping delete, or X if you don't want your arm to move as far. Let's replace it. So I've deleted the cube. Now I'm going to go to the top section up here. You'll see one that says add, and you'll get a whole bunch of options that will appear here, and you can replace it with something. But it's a long way to go for your mouse when you're adding stuff frequently in Blender. So Shift A is a very common hotkey that you should memorize. Shift A, memorize it as add. I'm adding something, Shift A. And you got a whole bunch of stuff here. Now, oh, by the way, this will be applicable like if you're in the node view or if you're in other views within Blender. So Shift A is a good one to memorize. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Some things that I've never used before, like speaker. Don't know what that does. I'm sure it's useful to someone, but not to me. The main ones you'll use are underneath mesh. You got a whole bunch of what are called primitives, like plane. You could add in a plane, and it's the ground plane. You got a whole bunch of other really like boring sounding ones, and then you got one right at the bottom there. It's called monkey. So obviously we're going to click it, and this brings us into the final part of this video that I promised you. We're going to set this monkey head on fire, which is a cruel thing to do, but it's not real, so no need to email me. So with the monkey head selected, we're going to use a little Easter egg feature of Blender, but it's like basically if you push F3, this allows you to bring up the search bar, which is actually very common. This isn't the Easter egg part, but F3 is like you can search for anything. Like if you forget the shortcut for something, you can just like type it in, and there it is, and you can do it. But if we type into the search bar smoke, you'll see there's one there called Quick Smoke. And what this does is it has applied a smoke simulation to my selected object, which basically just saves you from like setting up a box and then setting a smoke sim and blah, 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 blah. It's just done that for you. And then if I hit that play button right at the bottom there, you can see it's smoking. Now I promised you fire though. So if you select the monkey and then click the simulator panel button, which it's getting a bit advanced, but just in here where it says smoke, if you change that to fire and smoke, then there you go. You have set the monkey head on fire. Pretty random, but hey, it's cool, right? So that's the end of this video. Go ahead, click here to watch the next video where I promise you we will start building that donut, because this was just user interface fooling around showing you the best. This video is sponsored by Polygon, a library of textures and models for professional 3D artists. Click the link in the description to learn more. All right, enough fooling around with flaming monkey heads. Let's start making that donut. So I've got a brand new scene open in Blender, so clear whatever you did in the last video. And what I'm going to do is delete the default cube just by hitting delete, and I'm going to replace it by hitting Shift A, remember, to add a new object. And then underneath mesh, we've got the base meshes that you can start with. So you want to start with something that looks closest to what you want to create, which in this case is a donut. So this one is the closest match, a torus. So when you click the torus, you can see you get this, and it's okay, but it looks a little thin. It's a little bit weak for a donut. Thankfully though, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a box, and if you click the box, you can see you get settings. and this is going to change the look of the torus. Now, by the way, if you don't see the box, it's because you accidentally performed an action after you added the torus. So if I was to, for example, click on the donut, even though it's already selected, it's gone, and I can't get those settings back there. So some actions in Blender, you will get options immediately after you perform an action, but if you do another action, it clears it and you don't have those options anymore. Anyway, so with these options here, you can see I could change the resolution of the donut, and down here underneath major radius, I could change the size of it, how thick or how fat the donut is. So speaking of the radius and the size, it's a good idea when you're building something in Blender to start with the correct real world scale. So this major radius here is saying that this is 0.4 meters. The radius, so a diameter, is double that, which means that this is currently an 80 centimeter donut, which is almost half me. It's a big donut, very big. By the way, if you are American and you would like to use a different unit system, you can do it over here in the properties underneath units. You can change your unit system to imperial, and then it will use feet and inches and penny farthings or what other crazy units you guys have come up with. You can use that if you want, but for the tutorial, I'm going to stick to metric. So this size here, we want it to match the real world. So the research that I did says that most donuts are about 10 centimeters, right? Like about that big, right? So a radius is half of that. So therefore this should be 5 centimeters. So if I just typed in here 5 centimeters, we would get the correct thing, which is 0.05 meters. And then if I adjusted my minor radius, I mean, there's obviously no measurement for this, but like, you know, how fat the donut is totally up to you. If you want it to look like chubby, you can, you know, go like that. But I don't know, I think something around like 0.28, I think that looks pretty good. Maybe 0.26, I think that's what I used previously times the times that I did it. But anyways, like that. There we go. That's the one, that's the size I'm going to use. And then the other thing is the resolution of our donut. Now, you might think that you would want to use as high a resolution as possible, right? Because I remember I did that when I was starting out with Blender. Every new object I added, I used the most vertices I could, most highest resolution, not realizing that actually what you want to use is the lowest resolution and then use a subsurf modifier, which we'll get to next, to smooth it out, because then you've got less vertices to work with. It's easier to work with a lower res mesh than a higher res. Anyway, point is we want to set this to something low, but something that will at least have the correct overall shape that we want. So, you know, something like this. And also I want to keep the size of these faces. I want to keep them close to square, like as square as possible, I want to say. And you're not to know it because, you know, you're just starting out. But the reason for this is later on down the road, we're going to use displacements. And it's much better if you've got square faces for displacements. So anyway, something like that is pretty good. So these are the settings I'm going to use. You have a second to use it. And we're done. Okay, that's it. We have the donut ready to go. So we've added an object, but let's say you want to change the shape of that object, because that's a very common thing you want to do when you're building 3D creations, is you want to tweak it to look how you want it. So right now, this is the most perfect donut that ever existed in the history of the world. You could have like a donut competition and no one would ever be able to make as perfectly round and smooth shape as this, right? Because computers make things that are perfect and in the real world they're not. So that's why imperfection is the virtual perfection, which is a quote by someone, but it's very true. I don't know who said it, but it's very true. So what we want to do is make it look a little bit lumpy, a little bit misshapen. So to do that, we need to enter into edit mode. So if you go to the top corner, top left corner, you can see we are in object mode. And if you change that to edit mode, you will see that we get this, which makes it look like a grid, like a cage has appeared over it. Or the hotkey for this is tab, because this is a very common action. To switch between object mode and edit mode is tab. By the way, when you are in edit mode, the only thing you can do, the only thing you can click on is within the object itself. Like if I'm in edit mode on that and I tried to click on the lamp or the camera, you can see nothing happens. The only thing I can click on is the object itself. So just something to keep a note of. So while in edit mode, you can see that now that I'm clicking around, I can click on these little dots here. And each of these dots basically is the shape of the donut, as you can probably guess, right? And if I use the same hotkeys that you remembered from the last one, G to grab, if I was to G and grab this up, you could see that I would make a spike in my donut there. Now, I don't want just one singular spike because that would be horrible. And I also don't want to, like if I want to make this donut look lumpy, I don't want to go like this one and then this one and then this. Like that's a lot. That's a lot of work, and it's not even going to look very good. What I want to do instead is I want to like grab one and then like have it affect the vertices around it. So there's a tool for that, and it's proportional editing. So at the top of the screen there, there's a little button, or the hotkey for that is O to turn that on and off. And then when I do that, if I use the same shortcut, G, to move this one vertice, you'll see that now as I move it, the rest of the donut comes with it. But it only looks like the whole donut's coming with it. If I was to scroll up, like scroll on my mouse right now, just scroll up or down until you can actually see what's this little circle appear around. So if you scroll up, it'll get smaller. So anyways, if I do this, you can see that I can affect the area of vertices around it, right? So what I want to do is just I want to make it look lumpy. So around that sort of area, and I'm going to hit Z because I'm moving it and I want to move it along the Z axis. So it's just going up. And now you can see I've got part of the donut, which is a little bit lumpy. That's actually probably a little bit too lumpy. So let me just undo that and let's try it again. Move it up. Oh, come on. It's cleared my thing because I undid it anyway. So something like just a little bit lumpy, and then I'm going to grab like this. Bit lumpy. That's actually probably a little bit too lumpy. So let me just undo that and let's try it again. Move it up. Oh, come on. It's cleared my thing because I undid it anyway. So something like just a little bit lumpy, and then I'm going to grab like this one here, and I'm going to move that down a little bit. So now I've got a weird little lumpy bit of donut, and then I'm just going to like misshape the rest of it. Right? Because no donut is perfect, although they do try. Adjusted my, anyway, something like mode. So if you go to the top corner, top left corner, you can see yourself. Like if I'm in edit mode on that, and donut look lumpy, keys that you remembered from the last one, G to grab, if I was to G and grab this up, you could see that I would make a spike in my donut there. Now, I don't want just one singular spike because that would be horrible. And I also don't want to, like if I want to make this donut look lumpy, I don't want to go like this one and then this one and then this. Like that's a lot. That's a lot of work, and it's not even going to look very good. What I want to do instead is I want to like grab one and then like have it affect the vertices around it. So there's a tool for that, and it's proportional editing. So at the top of the screen there, there's a little button, or the hotkey for that is O to turn that on and off. And then when I do that, if I use the same shortcut, G, to move this one vertice, you'll see that now as I move it, the rest of the donut comes with it. But it only looks like the whole donut's coming with it. If I was to scroll up, like scroll on my mouse right now, just scroll up or down until you can actually see what's this little circle appear around. So if you scroll up, it'll get smaller. So anyways, if I do this, you can see that I can affect the area of vertices around it, right? So what I want to do is just I want to make it look lumpy. So around that sort of area, and I'm going to hit Z because I'm moving it and I want to move it along the Z axis. So it's just going up. And now you can see I've got part of the donut, which is a little bit lumpy. That's actually probably a little bit too lumpy. So let me just undo that and let's try it again. Move it up. Oh, come on. It's cleared my thing because I undid it anyway. So something like just a little bit lumpy. And then I'm going to grab like this one here and I'm going to move that down a little bit. So now I've got a weird little lumpy bit of donut. And then I'm just going to like misshape the rest of it, right? Because no donut is perfect, although they do try. Just make it look a little bit squishy, because otherwise it's going to look like a I don't know, like at a water park, right? There's little inflatable rings that you get. I'll never forget, as a kid, we go to the water park a lot, and yeah, there was like this ride called the Calypso Bay at Wet n Wild, Australia, and I used to love like stacking the rings on top of each other, and they kicked me out of the pool. They told me I had to get out because you're not allowed to stack the rings. But it was so fun. I wanted to stack them up and then be inside it and like roll around. But the lifeguards, who have nothing better to do, told me to get out of the pool. Anyway. So as you can see, I'm just grabbing parts of the mesh and I'm just moving it. You don't have to copy my exact motions as I'm doing this, just so you know. Just make your own misshapen donut. Don't copy mine. Follow your instincts. That's what you want. You don't want a perfect looking donut. You want something that looks weird. So well done. You've made something weird. Now you're probably thinking, cool, but can we please get rid of the jagged look? Because it looks like you would cut your finger running across this donut. It's too jagged. So if you are in object mode, which is important, you have to be in object mode, and you were to right click your mesh, you have these settings, And at the top there, you've got two settings which are very common, shade smooth or shade flat. So we're going to use smooth. So flat is used for things like buildings, flat planes, things like that. And smooth is for organic shapes like this one. And it's going to basically, where there's two faces, it's going to try to smooth them. Yeah, basically, it'll try and make it look smooth. Now, you'll notice it does look smooth, but the edges of it, you can see it does still look sharp. So shade smooth is just like it's changing the way it looks, but it's not actually affecting the actual shape of it in any way. So if you want to actually make this higher res, what you need to do is use a subsurf modifier. So the modifiers are found in the properties. So this is the properties here, by the way. We haven't really talked that much about properties, but it's this whole section on the right here. So if you click on the wrench spanner, I always get them confused. You can tell I've never got my hands dirty. I'm going to go with spanner, and this is the modifier panel, okay? So it's empty right now, but if you click on add modifier, you get this lovely list. And the one we are looking for is right down here where it says subdivision subsurf. And it's probably the most common mod or like effect that's used across all 3D software. What it does is it smooths out the mesh, right? And as a modifier, so what's good about modifiers is that it is what's called non-destructive, meaning that it's not applied. Like I can work on other parts of the scene and then I can come back to the donut and go like, I want it to be smoother. And then I can change the smoothness. And then I can come back to it later and go, it's too smooth. I want to change it again. So you're not actually like, nothing is being applied. It's just, it's all the settings are kept there so that you can come back and change them as you need to. So modifiers are fantastic. So what this subsurf modifier is doing is basically, if you look at each of these faces here, so this is what's called a face. And it's like when you've got 3 or more vertices and you add a solid face between them, that's a face. I don't know how else to explain it. But a subsurf modifier, what it's doing is it's adding like another grid between it, and it's taking like the average shapes of it. So like on the edge there, like where it was previously like sharp, it's doubled the resolution and it's averaged it out to try to smooth it. So what you're looking at is one subdivision because that's the viewport setting. The render setting is what it will render at, right? So when we get to that stage, that's the setting it's going to use. So if I was to increase viewport, it's doing another subdivision over that. If I was to increase it again, it would make it even smoother and smoother and smoother. You don't want to go too high though, because the higher you go, the more graphics is going to be used to render it in your viewport or when you do your actual render. So keep it low, but 1 is fine for this. Okay, so well done. All we've got is a lumpy donut, and yeah, we did make a long video. So go ahead and join me in the next video, and we're gonna make the icing for our lumpy donut. This video is sponsored by Polygon. Description to learn more. All right, enough fooling around with flaming monkey heads. Let's start making. G'day and welcome back to the Donut Show, where we make virtual donuts you can't eat. So in this video, we're going to make the icing. We're going to start making the icing. So what I want to do is I want to basically, there's, as always, 100 ways you could do it, but the way I'm going to do it in this part is going to be the easiest way, and that's to take half of my donut, just cut off the top half, duplicate that, and then give it some thickness, and then that is going to look like icing on top of it. So what I want to do is, I'm in object mode right now, but if I went into edit mode, this will enable me to, as we mentioned in the last video, click on each of these vertices here. So I want to select half of my mesh. So if I was just to drag a box over it, you can see I'm selecting, but a couple of problems. One, you can see that like it's actually kind of hard to look like side on, but also I'm not selecting through the mesh. So first thing I want to show you is how to look directly side on, because this is kind of like freeform look and there's perspective things there, but sometimes when you're modeling you want to look dead on and like do like an intersection, like cut something in half. So I'm going to use number pad 1, and that will look front on to the mesh. You can also use number pad 3, and that's just the right hand side of that, and then number pad 7 will look top down. Get my keyboard shortcut list if you haven't got that already, that'll come in handy. But it's all there. Alternatively, the other way, if you don't have the number pad, you can just click up here, these little axes here. That's how you can look side on, front on, etc. Or, as I mentioned before as well, for people that don't have a number pad, the tilde hotkey, that key underneath escape, that also has this little pie menu, so you can go top, right, left, or, because there's actually a fourth way you could do it, this is the same hotkey, I believe, as ZBrush, but if you hold down Alt and then middle mouse drag, like if I dragged up or if I drag to the right or left, it'll just snap you to the closest axis view, which is, there you go. There's 4 ways to do it now in Blender. There used to just be one, a number pad, right? But anyways, Blender's more accessible now, where we invite all colors into Blender now. The touch devices and styluses and everything. All right, so I'm looking front on right now. Now I want to select half the mesh, but I can't because I'm not able to see through it. So you can do that by going to the top there. There's a mode called X-ray mode. So X-ray, right. The hotkey for that, by the way, if you want it, is Alt-Z. Alt-Z will just toggle between that mode there. So with that there done, now I can drag a box over it and you can see I've selected the top half of my donut. So I want it to be the top half, like you could go like that, but I want to make the icing, there's going to be like dribbling icing in the next part of the next video. We'll do the dribbling bit, but for now, just want to select the top part. So I want to duplicate this. So to do that, the hotkey is Shift D for duplicate. And when you do that, you'll notice immediately after that, it's duplicated it and it's now following your cursor. Now, I don't want to click right now because then that would just place it randomly here. I want to cancel its movement. So I want to snap it back to where it was because I want it to be just resting on the donut. So I can do that by hitting escape or by right-clicking. Either of those functions will cancel a movement and it will now snap it back to its original location. So it's duplicated and it's now resting on top of the donut. So straight after that, I want to immediately make it its own object. So to do that, the hotkey is P. P for part of it to be separated. I don't know why it's P. It's been P forever. But P for penguin. That's a good way to remember it. I don't know why I said that. We're going to select selection. Okay, selection. All right. So now that I've done that, if you exit out of edit mode into object mode with tab, by the way, you can see we have 2 objects. Ta-da! And by the way, we haven't talked about the outliner, but it's this section in the top right-hand corner. It actually displays all of your objects. So if you click this little drop down, you'll see all the objects that are currently in your scene. So you can see we've now got 2 objects called torus. So actually, this is a good point. We should probably give them names right now. So I can double click this and I can call it icing. The other way, by the way, you can rename something is at any point right here. It's the same hotkey as you rename a file in Windows, which is F2. So at any point, like where your mouse is somewhere, you just want to give something a quick name, F2 is how you can name it. So I'll just call that donut, and you can see it's now given the name up there in the outliner, icing and donut. Just a quick thing, by the way, when we duplicated this, there's going to be some people following this tutorial that, and I'm just ignore this if you didn't do this, but some people are stuck right now because after they duplicated the icing, they right click and then they click something else. And now you have a horrible problem, the worst problem ever. You can see you've got mesh that is intersecting other mesh and you don't know how to select part of the mesh, like the mesh that's on top of it. And it's the worst problem, worse than Hitler. No. But if you have this problem, what you want to do is there's a hotkey, Control L. If you've got like one vertice selected, Control L will select all of its connected vertices. So I'm saying this because some people will be stuck at this point and they'll be like, I can't continue. So that's how you do it. You select part of the mesh. Anyways, I'm going to delete that. And now we've got our donut and our icing. Ta-da! Okay, so it's now sitting on top. Hooray for us. By the way, this is my 3rd time recording this video, so I accidentally haven't done this. But when by default, this is what you'll see. No, one more. There we go. When you try to zoom into your donut, you'll see that it's like half. It's like cutting into your donut, and it's very annoying. It's just because the clipping amount for Blender, like as a default, is set like quite high, like the start clipping, which means that because Blender's designed to work for like large scale scenes, and we're working at like 10 centimeters right now, really small. So this, I'm pushing N for Nelly. Nothing to do with properties, but it brings up the properties sidebar, or you can click the little arrow up there and drag that out. Anyways. Clipping start, I just want to change that to 0.001. And now when I zoom into the donut, it doesn't clip, so we can actually get in close without things disappearing. Okay, I'll hide that again. Okay, so I want to give this some thickness. The donut is paper thin. It is a paper yarmulke, and we want to give it thickness. So there's a modifier for that. So if you go to the modifier stack, by the way, I discovered, someone in the comments mentioned, spanner and wrench are the same thing. Today I learned. So icing, make sure your icing selected, and we're going to go add modifier up here. And the one we're looking for is called solidify. What this does is it gives thickness to any mesh. So it basically extrudes it, and it's now given thickness to it. And you can see that it's now a super, super thick icing. It's currently facing inwards, so that icing is pushing into the mesh itself. So there's this offset value here. If I drag that all the way up, it's now facing outwards. But it's too thick, obviously, unless you wanted a crazy amount of icing like they do for like cream cheese on bagels, right? It's just like, here's a kilo of cream cheese on a bagel. Too much. So what I want to do, just change this thickness amount to something reasonable. So I'll just type in, I don't know, 0.002. We'll give you 2 millimeters of icing. Maybe I'll add a 5 at the end there, just to, you know, it looks nice if it's like a juicy, thick icing on top. It's so gross. Dear. All right. So one final thing before we get to the next video. Hey, we're making good time. I want to move, because you can see like on the edge here, like that's a hard edge for that icing. You could cut your teeth on that edge there. It's a hard and right angle. And that's because what we've got is we've got the subsurf modifier. It's smoothing it out, but it's doing that first, and then it's doing the solidify step after it, and it's giving it a hard right angle edge. So I want to swap those around because it works top to bottom. So I'm just going to hit the up arrow. Now it's solidify first, and now we've got a rounded edge for that icing there. Yay for us. Cool. So we will, in the next part of this tutorial, we will go in and edit it, and we'll actually start to make it look droopy, like it's dribbling down a little bit. So go ahead, click here. G'day, everyone. G'day, and welcome back to the Donut Show, where we make... G'day, everyone. This part, we are going to be making our icing look less like a hat and more like icing which dribbles down. So I'm in edit mode on my icing here, and first thing to note is that because we added the solidify modifier in the last step, you can't see most of this mesh underneath it. So with the solidify modifier, if we just uncheck that last box, it'll just disable it whilst you're in edit mode. So in object mode and rendering mode, you'll still see it, which is good because that's where you need it, but it'll be disabled in edit mode. So that's good. So we want to make like this part of the mesh, like we want to dribble it down, but we don't have enough of these vertices, these little dots. We don't have enough of those to add detail. So what I want to do is I'm going to select the mesh by hitting A. That's how you select all in Blender. Or Alt A will deselect everything, by the way. And that is a common shortcut, whether you're in object mode, select all, Alt A, or edit mode, select all, Alt A. It's a widely used shortcut. Anyway, so I'm going to select everything. And what the heck did I just do then? Okay, select everything, and then I'm going to right click on the mesh, and the top option there is subdivide. So what that has done, for every square that was there before, it has added in 4 squares in it. So it has doubled the amount of detail of our icing here. It's basically doing what the subsurf modifier is doing, like it's smoothing it out, but it's doing it on a mesh level instead of like as an after step for rendering. Getting a little complicated. But anyways, you can see we've got double the amount of detail. Now, before we do anything else, in the bottom corner, you'll see you've got subdivide. And there's a couple of options here, like you could increase the number of cuts and we get more and more and more detail. But one cut is fine for what we need it. The one thing we do want to change is you'll see like it has double the detail, but it's still jagged, right? And that's not a good look. We want it to be smooth. So we want it to also, for each detail, we want it to like average out the faces. So turn up the smoothness to 1, and you can see that that edge there is now nice and smooth. Great. So that's how we're looking in object mode right now. Okay. So now we have enough detail, and you could see that if we were to grab one of these vertices here, vertex, the people in the comments are like, you keep using the wrong term. I swear it's vertices for plural, vertex singular, and I stand by that. I don't know. If I was to grab a single vertex here and I was to pull it down, and I want to use proportional editing for this. I want to keep that turned on. But if I was to do that, you can see the rest of the icing comes with it. And I really only just want that edge there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that edge there. And this is a common shortcut. I know I'm throwing shortcuts at you like it's rice at a wedding. I don't know where that's from. But it's Alt left click. Okay, so if you're on an edge there, just hold down Alt and then left click, and you're selecting an edge. That's the whole, you can select the whole loop like that as well, like the whole loop, or in this case, yeah, just the whole edge, right? So with that selected there, I'm gonna invert my selection, which you could do by going to select invert, or you can just remember the hotkey, which is Control I. And then another hotkey is hide. So I'm gonna temporarily hide this by hitting H. Hotkey, which is Control I. And then another hotkey is hide. So I'm going to temporarily hide this by hitting H. Okay. To bring that back, it's Alt H, and then H is hiding it. So it's just temporarily taking it away so that you don't affect it, right? Okay. So we finally got an edge with enough detail that we can start adding in detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of these little one singular vertex, and I am going to move it down. Okay, now one thing you'll note is that when you do this, if you were to move it down here, using proportional editing as well, it'll start to go through the donut. And, you know, you could move around and then pull that part out, etc. That's very fiddly. It would be great if the vertices stuck to the mesh underneath it. And we can do that by going up here. There is a snapping option. So you can snap by turning that on, and then we want to change what it snaps to. By default, it's increments, which means that like it'll stick to singular like grid floors, right? Which is definitely not what we need. We instead want to change it to face. So snap to face. And then if I pull it down, you'll see that it is sticking to the face. But I don't want just that to stick to the face. I want all of them to stick to the face. So I'm going to select project individual elements. And then when I do that, all of the vertices that are being affected are going to be sticking to the underlying face underneath it. And that's what we want. Yay! Okay, so let's do that a couple of times. Let's just go around it. And you'll notice also there are different types of proportional fall off. Like, for example, if you were to use sharp, then you would get kind of like that kind of like detail, right? So that can be kind of cool depending on what sort of thing you want. So here's the thing, like this step is actually kind of, it's a little bit fiddly because you can, without, if you're not careful, you can get kind of like repetitive looking icing, right? Like like it just looks a little bit too machined, like a little bit too, I don't know what the term is. Like it doesn't look natural. That's the term. So anyways, that's pretty good. Okay, well, it's okay for now. What I want to do now, though, is like this is like okay for like the overall, like just the edge of an icing, like being just a little bit jagged. But I also want to create some parts that are like dribbling down, because if there's one thing I've learned from looking at Google Images, donuts on Google Images, is that yeah, a lot of them have like dribbled down icing. I mean, to be fair, I think like the more commercial it is, the more I think they sort of dip it in a thing, and then it's like a cluggy kind of icing, so that it doesn't dribble as much. Like it does look kind of like a hat. You could do that if you want, but I want to go. I just want to make it look a little bit like more delectable, like something you want to like. Ooh, I want to eat that, right? So I just want to make parts of it that are like dribbling down it. So in a couple of areas on here, what I want to do is I want to select 2 vertices, and then, like if I was to like drag that down, you see that we don't have enough detail here, right? Because like parts of it are now sticking through, because it's going to be, and don't copy what I'm doing now, but I'm just showing you like that's a huge face there. So part is on here. But I just want to make it look a little bit like more delectable, like something you want to like, ooh, I want to eat that, right? So I just want to make parts of it that are like dribbling down it. So in a couple of areas on here, what I want to do is I want to select 2 vertices, and then, like if I was to like drag that down, you see that we don't have enough detail here, right? Because like parts of it are now sticking through, because it's going to be, and don't copy what I'm doing now, but I'm just showing you like that's a huge face there. So part of it is like clipping through the donut. So I don't want to do that. What I do want to do though is I want to select 2 vertices, and then I'm going to hit E. So this is a new hotkey for you, but this is extrude. And now if I pull that down, it hasn't moved those 2 vertices there. They're staying the same, but it's created 2 new ones and it's pulled them down. So it's now basically creating another face. And now if I was to bring back the rest of the mesh, that is how it looks. Whoops, right there. And if you were to, obviously, the reason you're just seeing that part is because the rest of it's hidden, right? Because we temporarily hid it. But that's kind of what I want to do. So I'm just going to create. You don't want to do this too much, because this is actually, coming to, the artistic eye and everything like that. I want to help you guys make a good looking donut. In this case, I grabbed 3, you'll see. Like if you do things repeatedly without, like you want to give emphasis to things. Emphasis, what am I talking about? You want to make parts of it that stand out from the rest. So if you just did like there to there, and then did there to there, and then there to there, and did like dribbles all the way around it in even increments, it would just look fake. So you want to do it kind of randomly. So yeah, somewhere there. I'm sort of picking an area which is like already slightly like pulling down to kind of, yeah, like basically you're creating the look of, it was weighty icing, and that part had too much weight to it, and so it actually dribbled down the edge there. So this part here I'll grab as well. I'll grab 3 of these and I'll pull them down. And by the way, I'm using S to scale. So I've got 3 vertices there, and I'm just scaling, right? So this is why it's good to know those hotkeys, G, R, and S that I mentioned at the start there, because it's used everywhere. That's the good thing about Blender, is once you've learned the hotkeys, they are applicable whether you're looking at nodes, whether you're in edit mode, object mode. It's all basically the same. G, R, S. They're kind of everywhere. Unlike the Adobe suite, which has got like Photoshop, After Effects, Illustrator, they've all got like all different hotkeys, and it drives me insane. It's like, you're the same company. Why can't you just like, let's have a company meeting. Let's figure this out. Anyway, Adobe. So I'm going to just keep doing this a couple more times. Yeah, all right. Maybe one more here. 1, 2, 3. That's a little bit too predictable. That's the word I was looking for. Predictable. You don't want it to look predictable because real dribbling icing would not look predictable. But there we go, right? Okay, so I hope this step wasn't too confusing for you, but even if you can't do the extruding step, it's, you know, it's still going to be okay. You're still going to be all right. Your icing is going to look fine. Really, we're just trying to make it look a little bit more random than just a hat sitting on top. Now, the next step, we will actually do like sculpting, and we will like add in like droplets, like make these things look less weird than they currently do. We'll get to that next. But one final thing before we get to the next part is you'll see that like the edge of this, like drip here, like all the way around it, like it's kind of like it's wrapping into itself, even though I don't think real icing would look like that. Like this part here wouldn't be like a complete glob unless it was like just wet and it just formed. You would see that kind of rolling fall off there. Anyway, what I'm saying is right here on this solidifier thing, we can actually create a crease on the inner part of it, and it will make it look like it's hugging the donut underneath it a lot better. And immediately when you do that, the icing looks just immediately the inner part of it, and it will make it look like it's hugging the donut underneath it a lot better. And immediately when you do that, the icing looks just the donut underneath. On the inner part of it, right here formed, wouldn't be like a complete, even drip to the weird than they currently. Next step, we're just trying to make it look a little bit more random than itself, even though I don't think real icing would look like that. Like this part here wouldn't be like a complete glob unless it was like just wet and it just formed. You would see that kind of rolling fall off there. Anyway, what I'm saying is right here on this solidifier thing, we can actually create a crease on the inner part of it, and it will make it look like it's hugging the donut underneath it a lot better. And immediately when you do that, the icing looks just immediately way better. So there we go. All right, so that's it for this part. It looks okay. In the next part, we're going to do some sculpting. So I will see you in that video once you click it. See you there. This video series is brought to you by Polygon. Make better renders faster. Time for something fun. We are going to be, working with a donut should be fun enough. But this part is particularly fun. We're going to be making both the donut and the icing on it look more shapely. So we're going to use sculpting to make this part look gloopy and like real icing, and it's a lot of fun. So before we do the sculpting, though,
Красное или синее. В Coloriba ты просто делаешь